think we all are pretty aware that mental health struggles are getting worse and worse year over year, especially when you take a look at the teen mental health side of it. We see this and most people think, well, how do we decrease the rates of anxiety and depression? But is that the right question to even be asking? Not really. We are being reactive to the problem instead of tackling it at its source, instead of thinking about this in a proactive way. A much more helpful question is to ask, how do we keep mental health struggles from getting this bad? This prevents the problem from happening again. Think of it like this. Let's say you live in a town with a lot of crime. Police can look at this problem in two different ways. They can say, well, we need to respond to the crimes as they're happening and catch these criminals. Or they can say, we need to figure out how to prevent these crimes from happening in the first place. I think we all can agree that it's better to try and prevent them before they happen.
I'd like you to know that I agree with every word you said.
We want to prevent mental health struggles like overwhelming anxiety from happening. Of course, you can't completely prevent yourself from ever experiencing anxiety, nor do you want to. But you can prevent it from happening so much that it takes over your life. How do you do this, you may ask? The best way I have found to do this is to create a morning routine that not only sets you up, but also your mind up for an optimal day. And if you do experience anxiety throughout the day, you'll be way more apt to be able to handle it instead of it handling you. I'm going to help you today with some of the most common mistakes, misconceptions, and questions people have when creating a morning routine so that you can create one for yourself that works best for you. These key points that I'm sharing are coming from my book that is being released. Oh, wait, what? Today, March 31st. Let me show you a couple of the most common misconceptions people have about morning routines. The first one is that you must do this every day, or on the other side of the spectrum, you only have to do it once a week. When I first built my morning routine, I was feeling really good about it, but I also felt like I could never miss a day. There were times where I would miss a day due to bad sleep, or I was away from home doing something else, etc. But instead of celebrating myself for hitting 6 of the 7 mornings that week, I would solely focus on that one day that I would miss, and I would dwell on it. I would feel horrible about myself. On the other side of the spectrum is the idea that you can do this once a week and it's going to have any sort of impact on your mental health. It won't. That's like thinking if you lift weights once a week that you're going to look like C.T. Fletcher. It's not possible. The key thing to note here is that consistency is important. One thing that I really took from my conversation with a guy named Sachin Govender is this: consistency is currency. What you are striving for is defined by your consistent actions towards it. It's important to note that being consistent and being perfect are two completely different things. Another misconception that a lot of people have about morning routines is that there is a one-size-fits-all routine, aka a perfect routine. This doesn't exist. I've talked to many mental health experts and advocates, and I always ask them about their morning routines. And I've never heard someone have the same routine that I have or someone else that I've talked to in the past. That's because we are all different human beings. We are all wired differently. We think differently, and we act differently. Because of this, you need to build a routine that works for you. And I can't tell you what that is, but I can show you how to build it. Let's move from misconceptions and move on to the common mistakes people make, including myself, when building a morning routine. One mistake that a lot of people make when building a morning routine for the first time is they try to go from no routine to a very long and complex routine. Start slow. The last thing you want to do is build this long, complex routine that you can't stay consistent with and you end up falling off and stop doing it. Consistency is very important, as you remember from earlier. Another problem of starting a morning routine that has a bunch of different practices in it is that it's impossible to tell which ones are working for you and which ones aren't. So you need to start with one and add one at a time. This brings me to the next common mistake that many people make. Have you ever heard people say something like, I tried meditation once, but it just didn't work for me? You must give each practice that you take on adequate time to be able to figure out if it actually is working for you or not. Whether you are starting out by meditating or journaling or exercising, you're not going to feel the impact of that practice overnight. It takes time to get that full benefit. So how long should you perform a practice to see if it's working for you or if it's not? 30 days is a good solid time to shoot for. You may know before then, but 30 days will give you a solid amount of time to figure out if it's having any sort of impact on your mental health. If you do something for 30 days and you're not feeling much of an impact or anything at all, it may just mean that you need to swap it out for something different. There are plenty more available mistakes to make, but you can avoid all those by purchasing my book today at feellessanxious.com. Time to move on. Here are a couple of the most common questions people have about starting a morning routine. How long should your morning routine be? Everyone is different, so there is no exact time. I've had routines that were as short as 10 minutes and ones that were as long as 2 hours. Find out what works for you, but like I said before, start small. So start with 10 minutes. And remember that the quality of your morning routine is not dependent on the length of time that it takes. A 10-minute morning routine can be just as powerful as a 2-hour long one. Here's a question that I battled with what seemed like for years when I first started my morning routine. Is it okay to take a break? The short answer is yes, but it all depends on what you need. If something comes up in your life, you may need to take a break from your morning routine. For example, in 2020, my mother-in-law passed away. After this happened, my wife, as you can imagine, was mightily struggling with accepting this fact. As a husband, it is my job to support her, and there were many nights, especially in the beginning, where I was up very late past normal, and which made it nearly impossible for me to be able to get up before my kids woke up. If I did try to perform my morning routine while also supporting my wife at the same time, it probably would have just caused more stress in my life. My basic rule of thumb is try not to go more than a week, 2 tops, without doing your morning routine, because it can be hard to get back on that wagon, get back on that horse, so to speak. And also, if you go longer than that, you can start to see a negative impact on your mental health. There are many more mistakes that I made, misconceptions that I cover, and questions that I hear often from people starting their morning routine in my new book, 10 Minutes to Feel Less Anxious. Not to mention, I explain why you should start a morning routine, a more in-depth analysis of how to get started, and what mental health practices you can add and which ones you might want to start out with first. Do yourself a favor and skip the hassle of trying to build a morning routine from scratch and get my book to help you get an in-depth formula of how to build a morning routine, not for anybody, but for you. Thank you all for watching. If you enjoyed this, please go subscribe to my channel. Also, in case you didn't know, I wrote a book. It's called 10 Minutes to Feel Less Anxious. If you want to go check it out, you can find it at feellessanxious.com or on Amazon, Barnes & Noble, all that good stuff. It would mean the world to me if you purchased the book, and it would even mean more to me if you shared with me what you've gained from the book, what steps you were able to do, your new morning routine, and how it has had a positive impact in your life. I will see you all next week. Until then, peace.